Eternal vigilance continues to be freedom's price. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. I want to thank everybody. First of all, happy Black Friday. I really want to thank everybody who came over to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel since I left Midas Touch last week. The support and the comments and the views and all of the feedback has just been absolutely extraordinary. So first off, I just want to thank you for all of that in the spirit of Thanksgiving, especially. I hope you all, whether you're with friends or family or spending Thanksgiving by yourself, I hope you had a beautiful holiday. And I just want to tell you how full of gratitude my heart is for you joining me and being in this fight with me. It has been such a beautiful thing to watch as I branched off independently with Lights On. We have a great show today. As I mentioned in the description, in the announcement, we're going to have some clear-eyed discussions about where we stand with recounts. I continue to believe that this is one of the greatest failures and abdication of duties to not do our due diligence into this election, with so many red flags, so many anomalies, so many experts sounding the alarm into what the circumstances of this election, and not having the courage and clarity to just do the due diligence is abysmal. It is an utter shame that our leaders, who, not the ones who we know are against freedom and democracy, but the ones who we have vested so much trust in, have not stepped forward to the plate. However, there is an opportunity remaining for citizen-led, voter-led recounts. So I'm definitely going to tell you about those, what I know about those today. We also have Susan Greenhalgh of Free Speech for People joining us again today. In a few minutes, we're going to bring her in. And she's really, her and I have had some conversations about just the deafening silence around this conversation. And she has been so ahead of the curve on this. She's been sounding the alarm really for years now, especially in the fallout of the big lie in 2020, because she saw this coming. She saw the fear of having this conversation about election security coming. And she's been sounding those alarms for years. So we're going to have a really good conversation with Susan. I also, as promised, want to address this abysmal week that we have had with the rule of law and with justice in Jack Smith's decision to, I don't want to say it was his decision. He cited the consultation with the Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice, the Department of Justice's decision to dismiss these cases, both the election interference, the crimes against democracy, conspiracy against the rights of the people, and the classified documents case, stealing nuclear secrets from the United States and storing them next to a toilet at your golf club. That these cases were dismissed out of what I believe to be completely flawed reading. They cited in this decision several times to the Constitution of the United States, how somehow the policy mandates that says that the Constitution, by its separation of powers clause, or separation of powers in the Constitution, mandates a dismissal of this case. I do not believe that there is any constitutional mandate for this DOJ policy. First of all, that in prior circumstances has led them to not indict a sitting president. And then in this decision, or this motions, they acknowledge that this was a completely unprecedented circumstance where you have a president who's left office, been indicted, and then is supposedly reelected, about to take power again. And they obviously had an unprecedented situation to deal with, and they did not have to wrap it up. They could have kept it alive. I know you've probably heard a lot of arguments out there about how Jack Smith was doing the best thing he did to dismiss this without prejudice, and to maybe keep some hope alive for this case to be brought again, which seems so realistically unlikely. The statute of limitations is going to pass. I've heard somebody say that, there could be a tolling of the statute of limitations to pause it. But frankly, who's going to bring that action? Is somebody coming forward? Is Jack Smith going to bring another action to toll the statute of limitations so it doesn't expire when Donald Trump's in office? What is so important in this moment is to have our good faith public servants, the ones who are telling us that they're pro-democracy, both in government, both in public service and in the media. So many people out there in the media in the so-called pro-democracy space right now are crying so loud about, oh, we're going to fight back. We're going to fight back. And in particular on the issue of recounts and just doing our due diligence in this election, their silence has been so deafening that it's like, this was your first opportunity. This was your needed opportunity. I mean, I have done what I'm literally here in front of you independently on this platform because this issue was so vital to me. How can you move forward when you don't address what is right there in front of you? So I think a lot of the damage, and we have to call this out, that we are about to face and our ability to mitigate it or not is going to be in proportion to the courage and the willingness of the people who say they're on our side. It's not going to be our enemies that are betraying us the worst. It's going to be our friends. And we have to, if they really are our friends, if we're really in this space and in this fight together, we have to call each other out. We have to demand more of each other. I want to share with you a few weeks ago, the first actually episode that I put on this channel independently was my interview with Harvard constitutional law professor Lawrence Tribe. I don't want to put this out here as some, opinion of my own. This is preeminent constitutional scholar in our country, litigated over 30 cases before the United States Supreme Court. I want to share with you what he said about Jack Smith folding in advance. I have to have your thoughts on where this stands with the multiple pending indictments against Donald Trump.
Well, there, I think, with where I sense you are, I think these cases should go on until the plug is pulled by the next president, so that he has to take the hit, basically, of stopping the prosecutions against him, both the one in Mar-a-Lago before Judge Cannon and the one before Judge Shutkin, essentially to cave in advance because of some policy when these cases against anybody else in the world would proceed to judgment is abdication of the worst kind.
Abdication of the worst kind. Thank you for your patience, by the way. I used to have a producer on the other end. For anybody watching live right now, when I was on Midas Touch, I had a producer on the other end running this live stream, and I would cue things up for him. Now I am running it by myself. I'm doing everything by myself. I actually wasn't 100% sure that I was live with you. So while that clip was running, I made sure that it was actually up, and glad to see it is, thank goodness. But thank you for your patience as I continued to figure out a few of the technical things here. But yeah, absolutely, abdication of the worst kind. It matters for the record who is allowing things to pass on their watch and who is not. We know who Donald Trump and his allies are. Let him take the actions. Let him demonstrate that he is trying to shut down a prosecution against him that was for vindication of justice for the people of this country that he violated. He should have taken the hit for that. And I really don't think we should have a lot of patience for the excuses for why this case was shut down in advance. I want to move on to where we are with, like I said, the conversation that I think it's absolutely unexcusable not to be having this conversation. As a reminder, I'm just going to go, we have, in my previous episodes, I've ticked down why this is not a conspiracy theory, why there is absolutely zero equivalency between people who have concerns about the red flags we've seen in this election and election deniers in 2020. I have talked about how it's ultimate gaslighting. I want to talk more with Susan about that today, but I'm just going to tick down one list, and we're going to get to another letter of another expert that came forward this week. Previously worked for President Biden on cybersecurity. But this is just one list from smartelections.us, which, by the way, is a very good place to go if you want to help out in Pennsylvania. I'll describe more, but here's the list they gave. They said there are legitimate anxieties about the 2024 election results. These misgivings center around events and patterns that occurred on or after Election Day, including somewhere between 60 and 80 bomb threats that's disrupted voting and may have impacted the chain of custody of ballots, known security breaches of voting machines. This is what my guest today is well familiar with and has written a letter to the White House herself about. A hardwired password in all Dominion systems was released to the public. Now, this is shocking, and it is true. And I didn't even learn about this until this week. According to security expert Chris Klaus, it would be an easy way to affect the vote count in swing states. All but North Carolina use Dominion voting machines in some counties. Much higher drop-off rates on the Republican side than the Democratic side, and also higher Republican drop-off rates than in previous election cycles. 3 separate letters from security experts listing their worries and asking for hand recounts or investigations. And I will just add to that list because this has been the biggest red flag for me, and that is all of the people who have come to me and others. And if you I highly suggest you go back to last week's live show, read the comments. How many people have said their vote is not showing up when they go online? They have cast a ballot either in person or by mail, and they're going online to check their status, and their voting record is not there. That to me is just if that was the only thing, that would be alarming enough that there are so many people coming forward saying my voting history has disappeared. Some, other cases of a lot of mail-in ballots not being counted. Very, very minor flaws that never before would have made a mail-in ballot not count is making people's mail-in ballot. I mean, there's too many red flags to have not had a full-fleshed review of this election. And we are tragically, we are past the point of Kamala Harris requested recounts in swing states. Now, I told you I was going to be clear-eyed today. One of the things that a lot of you have shared with me is your disappointment in Kamala Harris, in the Harris campaign. A lot of people have said, I donated hard-earned money to this campaign. I donated money I didn't have. I know myself how much blood, sweat, and tears I poured into trying to help her through my voice and my platforms get elected. And I know millions of Americans did that, and we deserved. She's one of the people, I'll put her in that list with Jack Smith today, who we count on. I believe many of the wonderful qualities that I touted about her to be true. But this was a moment where we really needed her to stand up. And I'm going to play this clip. I debated whether or not I was going to play this clip because, as some reviews said, rightfully, it's a little bit hard to watch. But I want to put this out there for clarity and for being honest with ourselves. And like I said, especially honest with those who are supposed to be in this fight with us and doing the hard work, right? The hard work that's good work. All right, so here is this brief clip that Kamala Harris put out earlier this week in a video with supporters.
Ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you. Look, this mission that we have, it takes hard work. But as you've heard me say many times, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work.
So calling for a recount, Ms. Harris, may have been hard work. It may have not been the easy thing. We might have had to navigate some very gaslit narratives about us being like Donald Trump, although we're nothing like him. None of us here are calling for an insurrection. None of us are saying a bunch of dead people showed up to vote. We just want due diligence done into a very disturbing situation where people's votes are disappearing. Obviously, one thing I haven't even really mentioned in my previous shows, just because it's speculation, but it is quite odd that Donald Trump was out on the campaign trail in the weeks before the election saying, I don't need your votes. I'm not supposed to say it, but I don't need your votes. Or that his podcaster friend was reporting after the election that Elon Musk said he knew earlier in the day that Trump had won. These are just circumstantial kind of oddities, but the actual things that we know, the concrete things that we know, are enough to have had you, Ms. Vice President, Madam Vice President, done the due diligence of doing a recount for the people, for the masses of people that filled those stadiums for you and believed in you and trusted in you. And yes, the work that is necessary is hard work. It's hard work. It means facing a lot of incoming. It means being a leader and correcting narratives that are wrong and doing the things that are the hardest, but the most necessary. I'm going to share one more letter that before we go to Susan, and I'm looking for Susan in the there she is, great looking. She's there in the waiting room, going to come on with us in a few minutes. But I want to share another letter that was put out this week by a former cybersecurity lead for President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on their 2020 campaign. Her name is Jackie Singh. For the record, I invited Ms. Singh on Lights On. She told me she is not taking media requests at the moment. So in lieu of having her here in person, I will read her letter. It says, "Dear President Biden and Vice President Harris." Let me put it up on the screen for you while I'm reading it. "Dear President Biden and Vice President Harris, I hope this letter finds you well. As the cybersecurity lead on your 2020 campaign, I was proud to contribute to ensuring a secure election process. Today, however, I write to you with grave concerns about the integrity of the 2024 presidential election and the urgent need for a forensic audit to restore our trust in democracy. Recent reports detail alarming irregularities, including bomb threats traced to foreign sources, breaches of voting system software, voter roll purges, and a surge in rejected mail-in ballots. Together, these issues undermine confidence in the election results. Security experts and election officials have expressed concerns about the vulnerabilities these events expose, with some calling for recounts of paper ballots in key states. Given these unprecedented challenges, I urge you to consider a comprehensive forensic audit. Such an effort would not only verify the accuracy of the vote count, but also identify vulnerabilities that could threaten future elections. Nations like Germany and Brazil have set examples by conducting forensic reviews to protect electoral integrity. The United States should demonstrate the same commitment to transparency and fairness. As someone who has worked to safeguard our democracy, I believe that a forensic audit is necessary to ensure that every vote is accurately counted and public trust is restored. I respectfully ask for your leadership in initiating this vital process. Thank you for your attention to this critical issue. I would be happy to provide further details or support as needed. Sincerely, Jacqueline Singh." So there's Mrs. Singh adding her voice to the chorus of experts, not conspiracy theorists, cybersecurity experts, election security experts, people with knowledge, with boots on the ground understanding of the vulnerabilities of the system, simply calling for due diligence. Now, an audit may be too late to actually address any of the real concerns to if there were a change in results. An audit, unfortunately, may be too late. And I want to bring in Susan now because she understands this process so well. Susan, welcome back to Lights On.
Hi, Jessica. Good to see you.
So good to see you. Happy Black Friday. Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving too.
Thanks. Yeah, I did, despite the current circumstances we all find ourselves under.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. So let's, right off the bat, I want to kind of get your reaction to Jackie Singh's letter and also just kind of where we stand being past the point of candidate requested recounts.
Well, I think it was a very important letter that she sent. Unfortunately, it seems like it's being met with the same refusal to face these calls as our letter did, and as some other people's calls have been received by the Harris Walz campaign. And I think as a cybersecurity expert, she certainly has certain insights into the way the campaign addressed the 2020 election, and which it seems to be that they're not doing so with the same vigor, at least as based on her calls for this audit. The call for forensic audit is a little. It's not something that we can actually see the president ordering. It's because elections are run at the state level. The opportunity would have been to verify the results, to verify the computer generated results, would have been through recounts of the paper ballots. That's the whole point of having a paper ballot, is to perform a check on the computer generated results. But we have been for want of a better word, gaslit for quite some time now, that we have sufficient audits in this country, that we have sufficient checks on election systems, and that the election systems are sufficiently secured. And the fact is they are not. This is something that has been, this messaging campaign has been going on for a long time, largely from pro-democracy, progressive, democratic-leaning groups, based on the mistaken idea that if people hear that there are vulnerabilities in the election system, they won't show up to vote. And the number one priority for democratic and progressive organizations typically is to get everyone out to vote without worrying about how their vote is actually counted on the back end. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing so much resistance to addressing this, but it's got to change, or we will never get our election systems adequately secured and trustworthy.
Yeah, what I said to you on the phone the other day, Susan, is if we can't have this conversation now, like God help us in 2026 or 2028, when people talk so, I feel like people are incredibly naive when they just talk about a normal election happening again, because I really feel like all bets are off. And I want to quote, you talk about having been on this for so long. I want to actually read to you your own words from an op-ed that you wrote back in 2021. Let's see, let me find it in my notes here. You were basically, like you said, raising these alarms about the security not being as tight as it should have been. You wrote this with Alex Halderman, who's a computer science expert at the University of Michigan. You wrote, quote, "Plenty has been written about how the big lie is corroding public trust and tearing at the fabric of our democracy. But in addition to these obvious harms, Trump's insidious disinformation is also inhibiting legitimate and necessary election security reforms. Well before the 2020 election, bipartisan investigations from the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee documented significant weaknesses in U.S. voting equipment. These findings only confirmed what previous studies from state elections officials and academic researchers revealed. Voting machines are computers with inherent vulnerabilities and weak security protocols." And here's the clincher. In 2018, after researching election security extensively, the Senate Intelligence Committee made recommendations to address known issues and called for strengthened election security standards nationwide. These reforms were largely incorporated into bipartisan legislation in the Senate, but Republican leadership and the Trump administration blocked any election security reform from advancing. It's hard to ignore the irony now, Trump now falsely claims election security problems led to millions of fraudulently cast ballots after he himself blocked measures to shore it up. I gotta say, Susan, looking back at that article in retrospect, it's not so ironic at all. It feels like very intentional.
Yeah, I'm not gonna assign motive, but we can just look at the facts as they're laid out. And it's a fact that after the 2016 election, we learned that the Russians had been actively trying to break into voting systems, and that they succeeded in getting into to networks and different systems in multiple states. That prompted the Senate Intelligence Committee to do a very extensive bipartisan investigation and report into the vulnerabilities of election systems. And it was ultimately blocked by the Republican leadership and the Trump administration. But I'll go back like a little bit further. Before, when this legislation was coming out, this was a chance actually to address things that we knew that were wrong with election systems for a long time, ever since we started to move to more computerized systems in the early 2000s after the Help America Vote Act passed in the wake of the Bush v. Gore decision. And there had always been this resistance within the progressive democracy community to address election security concerns and try to hush up the computer scientists and the groups that were trying to advocate and press for stronger protections for computerized voting systems, because of that mythology that I mentioned earlier, that if you tell people there's problems with election systems, then they're not going to turn up to vote. And I was at a conference in early 2017 where a major funder from a foundation that does funding for elections, the guy who is in charge of handing out the money, told the computer scientists in the room that they need to just drop it and stop talking about it because they're going to keep people from voting. So this is carried on. And after the 2020 election, when we had the big lie, then it kind of went up on steroids. This idea that we can't talk about election security problems, even though none of the things that had been identified in 2016 by the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee report had been yet fixed. That we still knew the Russians may be trying to break into our election systems, as well as other foreign nation state adversaries or criminal enterprises. And after 2020, there was a whole new messaging campaign to say our elections are secure because Donald Trump lied about it, and we have to support and protect election officials because they're being targeted unfairly and horribly, as we know, many people getting death threats and so forth, which is completely unacceptable. But that doesn't mean that we have to paper over the problems with the election system at the same time. We have to be able to kind of have more than one thought in our heads at one time.
Yes.
And do more than one thing at one time. And
Yes.
so the idea after 2020 is we've seen the progressive left community wanting to completely shut down any talk of the need for election reform, which is why Alex, Professor Halderman, and I wrote that op-ed, because we were trying to have that part of the conversation, but it's been extraordinarily hard, and that's why the fact that Trump allies unlawfully took copies of the software that counts votes, that those breaches were ignored and by pro-democracy groups that should be trying to protect our elections, as well as our federal law enforcement that just roundly completely ignored the whole series of events, which appears to be a multi-state conspiracy.
Yeah, that is obviously the predicate for your letter that we discussed when we had you on the first time. Just going back to your letter, obviously it called for the recounts, that it is too late for Kamala Harris to ask for at this point. Now, I have been made aware of some efforts to have voter-initiated recounts in the state of Pennsylvania. I know that there's a website called smartelections.us. I put the link in the description to this video. So if you click on their website, you can learn more about that. And if you're a voter in Pennsylvania, if you know anybody who's in Pennsylvania who has seen irregularities and is willing and able to sign an affidavit and move forward in this process, I would encourage you to go to smartelections.us. But this Pennsylvania, Susan, is a little bit different. The laws are state by state. And I know you were explaining to me the other day, actually, let's take this two-part. Just what are your thoughts on a voter-initiated recount in the state of Pennsylvania?
So Pennsylvania does have a provision where if you have 3 voters in each precinct that ask for the recount, and then they pay a fee, which I don't think is, I think it's like nominal, like $50 or something like that. But there's a lot of precincts, so that will add up pretty quickly. You can pursue a recount for that precinct. So you have to get all of the 3 voters for every precinct in every county if you were actually trying to do a statewide recount. So it could be done. It's going to be a tremendous undertaking, and good for them. And I'm glad that they're pursuing that. There's other ways that people are also looking at trying to check their results through getting copies of the ballot images in different states where they're available. In Pennsylvania, they're only available for early and absentee voting, not for in-person election day voting. But they will be available eventually in Michigan and Wisconsin. They make them available after the period for a recount closes and after certification. So you can potentially look at the ballot images, but well after it could do any good, like in the same way that they do audits in Michigan and Wisconsin. It was well after certification and the recount window closes, and they have it written in their regulations and guidance is that the purpose is to develop better practices for the next election, not to actually provide a check on the election that was just held. Which is something that, like, we've been sold a bill of goods and been told, like, don't worry, there are audits that are going to be conducted. Somebody that I've been working with told me recently that they were in touch with an attorney who is very well connected to sitting senators and so forth. And this person said, this is ridiculous. We don't need a recount because we know that they do audits where they hand count paper ballots in every state after the election to make sure the results are correct. And I explained that's absolutely not true. It's that this person has been hearing people tell them, don't worry, everything is fine. We do these checks and balances and there's post-election audits, but it's not the case. So Michigan, Wisconsin, well after the fact. In most cases, the audits are done county by county, which means that nobody is taking the discrepancies that may be accumulating county by county to see how they impact the entire statewide race. The counties might not all do the same audit, the same races, depending on how the states choose which contest to audit. There's just so many problems with the audits that we have in place. They do not do what we've been told that they do.
Yeah, as you pointed out to me, the results of audits are not legally binding except in a handful of states like Arizona. And if everybody remembers the whole Cyber Ninjas episode, the reason that they probably went through that whole exercise in a state like Arizona is because Arizona is one of the few states, if I understand correctly from you, Susan, that audits can have legally binding results. But as you said, they're mostly just for, measures moving forward, not for retroactive changing of results.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Susan, thank you so much for coming back and clearing this up. And I would echo your call once again. Go to smartelections.us if you want to be involved in this. I think even though the likelihood of any countrywide, nationwide result at this point being reversed is very low, I think that we still deserve maximum transparency and due diligence. And if there is an opportunity to do this that our leaders have failed us at, maybe we, the people, can pick up the mantle. God knows we, the people, are going to be picking up the mantle in all kinds of departments. So I would strongly encourage you to do that. Susan, thank you so much for coming back and joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So Susan was talking there a little bit about Russian interference, and I didn't know where we'd be on timing today, but I'm glad she did, because I want to talk about Russia and Ukraine. It's such a devastating thought to think of the place that we are in the world, where we have someone who is poised to come into power, who is more aligned with Vladimir Putin than he is with the rest of the free world. And we are getting news just today that Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, very tragically to me, and, you know, I don't envy the position that this man is in for 1 second, has said for the first time that he would consider an end to the hot war phase of the current conflict in exchange for NATO membership. He is putting these cards on the table because he is trying to salvage protection, any lasting protection for his country. And I've said this a million times. If you've been watching Lights On for a long time, you know this. I believe that any handing off of Ukraine is not peace. It is like allowing a burglar to come into your house, violate your wife, steal your goods, and then say, let's make a deal. I'm going to keep your master bedroom, and then we can just have peace. I mean, it's just ludicrous to suggest that any kind of annexation of Ukrainian territory to Russia is a peace plan. But I know the position that Vladimir Zelensky is in, with Donald Trump poised to take power again. Now, I want to share with you a couple of things. One is that Trump's envoy to Ukraine is going to be a man named Keith Kellogg, who I actually met very briefly in 2016. And this is what Keith Kellogg has said. He said, the U.S. doesn't need involvement in another conflict. And he thinks that our involvement in helping Ukraine has hurt our own stocks of weaponry. And he says that Ukraine's NATO membership, as for, Zelensky's hope of joining NATO, Keith Kellogg says Ukraine's NATO membership is in truth a very distant prospect, tentatively offered. Any tentative offer of Ukraine membership to Kyiv should be put on hold indefinitely, quote, in exchange for a comprehensive and verifiable peace deal with security guarantees. So there he is again, signaling towards a quote unquote peace deal that's not really peace. I want to play for you some clarity from the head of Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service, Richard Moore. You're going to see, and I know you already have, you've seen it from Canada and Mexico with these absurd threats of tariffs. You're going to see it from a lot of world leaders coming out and taking a stand against Donald Trump. We're going to see a lot of leadership in other places of the world to fill this void of leadership and the absolute corruption that is going to try to take power in this country. So here is Richard Moore, again, head of Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service.
We have recently uncovered a staggeringly reckless campaign of Russian sabotage in Europe, even as Putin and his acolytes resort to nuclear saber rattling, to sow fear about the consequences of aiding Ukraine and challenge Western resolve in so doing. Such activity and rhetoric is dangerous and beyond irresponsible. If Putin is allowed to succeed in reducing Ukraine to a vassal state, he will not stop there. Our security, British, French, European, and transatlantic, will be jeopardized. The cost of supporting Ukraine is well known, but the cost of not doing so would be infinitely higher. If Putin succeeds, China would weigh the implications, North Korea would be emboldened, and Iran would become yet more dangerous.
Peace, peace, where there is no peace. I'm going to continue our trip around the world, and then I want to come back to home, come back to our country, come back to our power, come back to what we need, what I really think we need to be doing right now. But let's continue our trip around the world. I want to talk about what happened this week in the Middle East. There, of course, was a ceasefire in Lebanon, between Israel and Lebanon. And I told you this episode was going to be clear-eyed, so I really want to be clear-eyed on every subject. And I think that man named Simon Tisdall, who works for The Guardian, really got it right in this op-ed. He said, "Don't be naive about the ceasefire in Lebanon. It may mean more horror and death in Gaza." I'm going to read just an excerpt from that article. "It's a fact, for example, that Benjamin Netanyahu has not suddenly turned dovish peacemaker. Having unjustifiably ordered a large-scale ground invasion in Lebanon last month, preceded by aerial bombing and sabotage attacks in Beirut, Israel's hawkish prime minister is quitting while he's ahead. Operation Northern Arrows is being presented to the public as a success, unlike the 2006 war. Hezbollah's military power has undoubtedly been seriously degraded. Yet, the reasons why Netanyahu has refused for more than a year to accept a similar ceasefire in Gaza are intrinsically unchanged. The war there suits him politically and personally. Unlike in Lebanon, he continues to seek, quote, total victory. Concessions to Hamas, such as releasing Palestinian prisoners, would sink his hard-right coalition. The war keeps at bay an official investigation into the security failures surrounding the 7 October 2003 Hamas atrocities, and likewise court proceedings against Netanyahu for alleged bribery and corruption. Whatever Biden may hope to achieve in the dog days of his presidency, Netanyahu has no incentive to end Gaza's agony before his ideological ally, Donald Trump, swaggers into office on the 20th of January. You know, I spoke a lot in the lead up to this election about how Benjamin Netanyahu and the destruction he has caused for his people in Israel was a warning for us with Donald Trump, how these people, these dictators, these power-hungry individuals, corrupt individuals thrive on chaos. And obviously Hamas is a bad actor. Obviously Hamas are terrorists, but Benjamin Netanyahu funded Hamas to destabilize the Palestinian Authority. He had warning signs, as that article mentioned, about October 7th. And more than anything, he was facing corruption charges in his own country. I subscribe to the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, which, by the way, I highly suggest and support them because their free press rights are under attack in Israel right now, and they do excellent reporting at Haaretz. But every single day in the bulletin that they put out about the war, they have a little paragraph that says the context of it is in what's going on behind the scenes is Netanyahu's corruption scandal and him facing these charges. So war is a really nice distraction for a man like Benjamin Netanyahu. And anybody who was thinking peace was what you're going to get with Donald Trump, you have to understand that these people are chaos agents. They thrive on chaos. And what do we have now? We have Donald Trump set to take power and avoiding accountability for his crimes against us. And that's why today and for the last several shows, and the reason why I'm here on my own is because how can we possibly not have a legitimate conversation about whether this man actually won the presidency, this convicted con artist backed by Russia and linked up with the world's richest man, taking this sweep of swing states that seemed so counter to the energy that we saw on the other side and all of these red flags that we've discussed today. How could we not be taking this period of time right now before he takes power to make sure he actually won? I really encourage anybody who calls themselves a pro-democracy, whether it's somebody in public service, a media outlet, an advocacy group, legal, nonprofit, whatever, to really examine themselves right now and think about whether they missed this vital opportunity. Can you imagine if, as Susan was saying, we find out when it's too late from some of these audits that this election was not right, and people just didn't even have the courage to come forward in this window of time and talk about it. It's why I've had very little patience for talking about other things, for talking about the chaos show that Donald Trump has been putting on with the people he wants to bring into power with him. But I will tell you, my friends, I continue to remain undoubting, steadfast in my belief that the ultimate power is with the truth, and ultimate government and dominion is with truth. In my understanding, God, truth, love, principle, all the same thing. And our power and our protection, our defense, is in proportion to standing with that principle, individually and collectively. And you better believe I'm going to be sharing with you and thinking about more ways to do that on a practical human level. And that's what this show is going to continue to be focused on. So, and the rule of law, the Constitution, a family of mine was saying, please read from the Declaration of Independence today. And I thought about it. I read from it over the summer near the 4th of July, because it was right when that Supreme Court decision, the obscene immunity ruling, came out. And the Declaration of Independence, line by line, I mean, it's almost like they're referring to Donald Trump and his crimes and why they said they wanted to separate from a king, a tyrant. We got to remember what this country was founded on. We do have to remember that we have a constitution, as I have said before, that bars this man from taking the oath of office. It bars him from taking the oath of office. That's his first act, will be a blatant violation of the Constitution. We need to have really serious conversations and a commitment to the rule of law in bold ways, because we are entering a very dangerous place where, as I've said, the people who we have entrusted to do what's needed have abdicated and given up in advance, have abdicated that power, even while they're telling us to not forget the power that we have. That's the truth. That's the truth. And we can't stand for that. We have to be stronger than this. And we have to, with love and the constructive criticism that we give people that we love, be not afraid to call it out. I took taking this way back, because my calls for Donald Trump to be held accountable were never from a place of ill will or vengeance or hatred. Even Donald Trump, and let's not forget this is a miserable guy. This is a guy who's been lying to himself for his whole life. For 70 plus years on this earth, hasn't known the truth, hasn't known who he is. And that is a sad and miserable place to be. So accountability for this man, a electoral defeat, prison time, whatever it should have been, would have been the greatest gift, would have been the most loving thing for a man who is deeply unhappy. So he may be taking so-called power, but he has no real power in him for a multitude of reasons. I want to leave you today, and I'll get some announcements on the other side and reminders, but I want to leave you with something I kind of found in my vault, and that is a hand videoed. You're going to see it's a little wobbly. I was videotaping the television on January 6th, the wee hours into the morning of January 7th. I was in a hotel room in Georgia. I had taken a trip down there to help get Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff elected, and had expected to wake up on January 6th with this just beautiful cleansing moving forward. Instead, we collectively went through this hell and terrorism and trauma. And I was videotaping that night in the hotel room, the TV, and I found this video in my old files. And I wanted to share it with you because it's what I opened the show with today, Eternal Vigilance. This is the Senate chaplain, Barry Black. I think it's as relevant right in this moment and forever as it was that morning.
We have been warned that eternal vigilance continues to be freedom's price. Lord, you have helped us remember that we need to see in each other a common humanity that reflects your image. You have strengthened our resolve to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, domestic as well as foreign. Use us to bring healing and unity to a hurting and divided nation and world. Thank you for what you have blessed our lawmakers to accomplish in spite of threats to liberty. Bless and keep us. Drive far from us all wrong desires. Incline our hearts to do your will and guide our feet on the path of peace. And God bless America. We pray in your sovereign name. Amen.
Let us have the courage to do that eternal vigilance, to actually defend our country against enemies, foreign and domestic. He talked about unity, and I'm gonna repeat this as many times as I can. I think that you need to be ready and expect allies from the most unlikely places. You are looking right now at someone who supported Donald Trump very ignorantly and blindly in 2016. And I have done a complete 180 and become one of the strongest advocates against the lawlessness and corruption that this man has poisoned our country with. You are going to find some of the strongest voices from people who even, and maybe not voices, maybe just allies in the fight, but these people are going to be so fed up. They are going to realize, how badly they were used and manipulated, and they are going to join us in this fight. So look for those allies. Look for those allies. As always, those with bad intentions seek to divide and conquer, and we have never really been against each other. That's what the goal of Russian propaganda has always been to do, to divide Americans, to pit us against one another. It's what Donald Trump does. It's almost like the past few weeks of the election, we just forget about. But do you remember just a few months ago, this man was saying that legal Haitian migrants were eating pets in Springfield? I mean, this was the rhetoric. This disgusting lies about our neighbors that are actually building up communities. So he will try to divide us all. Don't let him do it. Let us take back our real founded unity in this country that is independent of the sickness that he has put out, and really stick to that and look for practical ways to combat this lawlessness. It cannot stand. We have to take a stand. We have to take a stand at some point. I want to thank you all so much for, once again, as I said at the top, joining me here on the Lights On, Independent Lights On with Jessica Denson live show, for subscribing to Jessica Denson. If you're here and you haven't yet done that, please subscribe to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. And for all of your incredible feedback. I don't like to talk about numbers a lot. I just don't like to do that. But I will say that there over 200,000 people viewed my live show last week, doing my show for the first time. That is absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for viewing, for commenting, for sharing, for donating. The one great way to support my work, and I've given up sponsors having left Midas Touch. This is just a little fun fact. I was very picky about the sponsors that I would let onto Lights On. So we didn't have a ton of sponsors even when I was on Lights On. Very few that I would allow onto the show, and even fewer that I would read for. But I'm not in the foreseeable future that I can imagine going to have sponsors on the show. So if you want to support my work, you can do it at thejessicadenson.com/donate, thejessicadenson.com/donate. And another way to support is by buying the Lights On merch. I have hats and shirts, and it's Black Friday. If you want to send any of these out for Christmas, you can buy them at the Lights On merch shop, which the link is in the description to this video. It's also at thejessicadenson.com. So you can check that out there. I've been known to send thank you videos to those who buy merch. But I really just want to thank you all so much, and tell you to continue to stay strong and stay with the truth. And I said this last week, I want to say it again. It doesn't mean we're going to know exactly in every moment what is next, but I have demonstrated in my life so many times that starting from that right foundation, you get those answers. You get that guidance in that direction. And the victories in my legal battles against Donald Trump have all come from following with that right standpoint from the beginning, not from a legal strategy. I started off without a lawyer, but from starting from the right principle and then listening fearlessly, even in the darkest times. I mean, I was threatened with bankruptcy. I couldn't work for years during the Trump administration the first time because of how he tried to destroy me. But I stuck with that principle throughout. And that is what ultimately got me to victory. And I'm still litigating against him, as you'll see if you go to thejessicadenson.com/donate. I have an ongoing lawsuit, not going anywhere with that either. So just please stay with that principle and trust in the truth. Don't move from that place. I want to wish you all a very happy beginning to your holiday season. Hope you once again had a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you so much for joining me. It means the world. I'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.